bridge collapsed. The mountain road washed out. All the signs are obscured by fog. Your only directions are detours. Eventually it dawns on you. Sometimes you need to get lost to discover where you're supposed to be. Welcome to Merlin's Barn.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to Merlin's Barn. We are broadcasting to you once again live from Fort Blanket, south of the Yukon. And tonight you have myself, and we have with us John.
How's it going, Merlin?
And it is well.
Good.
We have something to drink, and if you our listeners are noticing, we have now finally accomplished very good sound that we are quite happy with. We don't sound like we're broadcasting from a cabinet or under the kitchen sink. And that's part of the reason for bringing John on tonight. Is John is our wonderful producer who also deals with all of the horrific sound that we produce and tries to make it into something palatable for you all.
Always an adventure, just like the barn.
Especially the when we thought the crinkling of the misfortune cookies was a good idea.
Yeah, it was a brilliant idea.
Yeah, that was horrific. We apologize for that.
It's all right.
So we're starting off with we're celebrating with what was this? Maryland Tobacco Barn Distillers? Was that what it was?
I believe so. Tobacco Barn Distillery, bourbon, 90 proof.
Yeah, it's absolutely wonderful. There's one of the things with the barn is it is so huge and meandering that there's a couple games that get played here. One of them's a game, and one of them's just happens. The game is what can we hide in the barn and see how long it takes Merlin to notice it, which has involved all sorts of variety of stuff. And then the other problem is people give me things, I know I had it, and then I completely forget about it because there's 8,000 square feet here. And so I was digging around cleaning behind the bar and realized that I'd hidden this beautiful bottle of bourbon on my birthday party underneath the bar so that it wouldn't get drunk up or sucked down, and I think I replaced it with a big bottle of Jack Daniels. So we have discovered this in celebration of our good sound. And we're going to cover a couple things this evening. We're going to discuss, some of our wonderful alcohols, lead into some moonshine stories. And we're also going to John brings a couple things from the table, being from Wisconsin, which brings us a response to the cheese discussion of the episode of Roadside Oddities, and also leads into what's the popular winter sport in Wisconsin?
Staying inside and drinking brandy, I believe, but there's curling is big in Midwest. But there's only a few things to do in Wisconsin in the winter. You can snowmobile, you can hunt, you can do curling, you can do some cross-country skiing. There are no hills, so downhill skiing is out. There is Rib Mountain, but it's not a mountain. It's a pimple. What's another, I guess, ice fishing. Yeah.
Ice fishing, okay, yeah.
Oh, go out there and ice fish, yeah. Oh, park the F-150 over. Oh, where'd it go? Where'd the truck go? Where'd we park? My God, what's that hole doing in the ice?
It was not thick enough there, eh?
No. Oh, my God. Well, this last, what was it, Friday, it was something in the neighborhood of this past weekend was the big monster fishing tournament on Lake Winnebago.
Okay.
The day before, everybody set up. The day before, the winds were hitting 60 miles an hour, and all the shanties were being blown around the lake.
Oh, my God.
And it was like 20, felt temperature was 20 below. It was actually like 2 above zero. And, everybody's out there having a good time. You always know when it drops below zero in Wisconsin because the guys start putting on T-shirts. Ooh, brisk.
And we only had that, what did we get down to, like 6 below here or something this winter?
Maybe for a very short period.
I know there was one morning I got out and started up the Jeep, and it said 6 below on the Jeep. And then I was de-icing 2 other vehicles and realized my mistake when I got to work, and one of my friends had to put a heater under my desk to bring feeling back into my leg, which took a few hours.
Yeah.
That was entertaining, to say the least. I always think of with the ice fishing, I always think of grumpy old men.
Yes, yeah, they were Minnesota, but same vibe.
Now,
Basically the same vibe.
and we weren't that fancy in New Hampshire with it, but I think that's because it wasn't as cold. My grandfather and I would go out with, he had this big auger with
Oh.
wooden handles on it, and he had all these little, almost like these little tent-like things that had little tripods that had a line on them.
The
And when
tippets.
Yeah, is that what a tippet?
Yeah, tippet.
And when it tugs on it, the little flag goes up. And I remember one winter we're out there hand augering into the ice, and we hear this. We hear what sounds like a chainsaw in the distance, and we look over, and the guy's got a little two-stroke engine auger.
Yeah, power auger.
Yeah, we're just watching him like, oh, that's nice. And finally, he sees us hand augering our like second hole.
Yeah.
And he comes over. He says, "How many holes do you want?" And my grandfather's like, 5. And so zzz, 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 zzz. We're just standing there like, oh wow, we've entered the modern era.
Yep. Yeah, and some of the shanties are amazing. They're television, refrigerators, stoves, you name it. They can cook in there. They can play poker, you know.
I keep thinking I think Walter Matthau, was it Walter Matthau's little shanty in Grumpy Old Men, where he had the little portable television set, and he's sitting in there with his pocket fisherman or something like that.
Yeah.
I think Jack Lemmon had like a phonograph in his or something like that.
Yeah. A shanty is basically home away from home. Some cases maybe better than home, depending on how much you paid for your truck,
Yeah.
which you're going to have to pay a lot of money to pull out of the lake when it inevitably goes through.
We see that a lot with the Jeep people too. Actually, I think I can drive across this $60,000 Jeep in the bottom of a lake.
Oh.
Will the warranty cover this? No, the warranty does not cover that.
The warranty does not cover stupid anywhere in
No.
any state. But yeah, Wisconsin is known, especially in Illinois, as the Australia of America because we're, kind of crazy and we'll try anything. And no alligators, but we got everything else that'll kill you. And Matt had gone there not too long ago, and he came back with some amazing stories of cheese palaces, cheese chalets, cheese shops every 5 or 6 minutes as you're cruising down any given road. And that's kind of true. I mean, you notice it more when you're there for the first time or you don't visit Wisconsin very often. They sell a lot of cheese, but Wisconsin's nickname was the dairy state.
Yeah.
And it's probably not something you'd want to talk about in Wisconsin, but I think in terms of output, California is probably the dairy state of the United States, except that it has so many other things that nobody cares. So Wisconsin gets to be the dairy state.
I didn't even know California had that much dairy output.
Yeah.
I figured they'd banned cows at this point or something.
Well, maybe that's the case. Maybe now it's just tofu. Maybe it's the tofu capital of the United States. Anyway, Wisconsin was always, America's dairy land. Come and smell our dairy air, and that's that sort of thing. One of the persistent myths coming out of Wisconsin was that restaurants serving apple pie had to do so with a slice of cheese. That is not true. There was never a law that required restaurants that served apple pie to serve that apple pie with a slice of cheese.
If I remember, in New England, it was often a slice of cheddar.
It would have been cheddar in Wisconsin as well,
Yeah.
more than likely. But there was a law from March of 1935 to June of 1937 that required all restaurants to serve with any meal a piece of butter and a piece of cheese. Didn't have to be on the entree or anything else. It could be served on the side, but you had to, by law, serve a piece of butter and a piece of cheese with any meal in a restaurant.
To support the dairy industry, I assume.
Well, guess what? Yeah, farmers are lobbyists too.
Yeah.
And so but the law was sunset, and most of these laws don't have a sunset clause, but it had a sunset clause, and June of 1937 it went away, and good riddance. But there was a long-standing battle of another type, also related to dairy, and that was the butter wars, butter versus oleomargarine. And in Wisconsin, from 1895 to 1967, you could not sell or purchase yellow oleomargarine in Wisconsin.
I didn't even know margarine went back that far.
Neither did I, frankly,
Yeah.
in 1895, but it did. And it would, of course, be processed white until you colored it yellow.
Okay.
So what happened? And I was old. I'm old enough to. I lived through the waning years of the oleo wars, and what people would literally do. This is crazy. They would drive over state lines into Illinois and Minnesota to purchase yellow oleomargarine.
Just for the color.
But they could get it at home. It tasted exactly the same, but you'd go across it's yellow because who's going to want, like, no kid's going to eat, like, what's this white pukey stuff on my toast, Mom? It's oleomargarine. It can't be yellow, so just shut up and eat it, right? Okay, so it was, if you wanted to go across state lines to pick up yellow oleomargarine for your own personal use, you had to be licensed to do so, to bring it back into the state.
Oh, this is fantastic.
Isn't that amazing? Amazing. And so there was skullduggery as usual, and that's one of the things that keeps life going and fun. And then in 1967, they just scrapped the law. People were complaining. It's like, forget it. Let me just buy yellow oleomargarine. If I want butter,
Yeah.
I'll buy butter. And, of course, now this is one of those things where, oleomargarine is better for you because it doesn't have butterfat or whatever the hell is going to kill you at that with butter. And now, of course, no, eat butter. Don't eat oleomargarine. It's like eating plastic. So, trends come and go. Science changes, what have you. But, yeah, Matt, next time you're in Wisconsin, pick up some butter and see if you can find a stick of yellow oleomargarine. I bet you can.
That's something. I mean, my first experience with the cheese shops was just, I think I mentioned it in the other episode too, was just we rolled into Wisconsin on the Alaska trip, and we just started seeing signs for cheese shops, and we got a spot at a KOA campground. We were just rolling until we got tired, and we pull off the highway, and there's this magnificent, huge cheese shop with a gigantic 2-story cow outside of it. And we're looking at this going, what is going on here? And there was the cheese shop, there was a McDonald's across the street from it, there was the campground. And so we settled into the campground, and my ex, in the morning, I think it was like 7:30 in the morning, she gets up and goes over to the McDonald's to pick up some breakfast for us. And she comes back and she says, there's a line at the cheese shop. I said, you're kidding. She says, they're not even open yet, and there's a line at the cheese shop. And I'm guessing this is for what, the cheese curds?
Cheese curds. That's another thing that, again, if you're not from Wisconsin, cheese, and especially from the east, maybe the west coast as well, cheese curds are fresh cheese, something like mozzarella, but yellow. So it's kind of a little bit of a cross between cheddar and mozzarella. And Matt had mentioned this too, that if you get it fresh early, it squeaks squeaks.
I can hear the screams of the cheese.
Exactly. It's audible. It's like you're chewing on a mouse. And
My
apparently
God.
this goes away after some time. It took me a long time to warm to cheese curds. Native Wisconsin, kind of native Wisconsin, but I just never really got the deal with cheese curds. And in fact, when I worked in central Wisconsin for a couple of years, you could get not only cheese curds in gas stations, but you could get deep fried cheese curds in gas stations.
Jesus, Mary and Joseph.
They were all shaking their heads.
That obsessive with the cheese curds.
And deep fried cheese curds. I mean, deep fried butter would be the next thing, right? As long as it's yellow. And I did finally get a hold of what I guess would be considered good cheese curds, and I like 3 of them, maybe 4. And I have had deep fried cheese curds, and yeah, dude, it's a thing.
These came up in conversation too on a camping trip I was on. We do a annual Jeep camping trip up in the mountains in central PA, and there's a veterinarian who comes out from Wisconsin, and he was discussing the cheese curds and the fresh cheese curds one night, because we'll get into the campsite around maybe like 6 o'clock, and then put up a fire and then just sit there chatting for about 5 hours or something until we go to bed. And so cheese curds was one of the discussions. I'm lactose intolerant, so my experiments with cheese are limited, because I'll take a lactate. And largely, I just really like a nice cheddar, because I don't have to have a lactate for that, and it doesn't upset me. So cheese curds are almost on my does that scare me list. I'm not sure. It also falls under why I've never had poutine, which, well, everybody's like, hey, it's a Canadian dish, you have to love it. And I'm sitting there going, I don't have to. I don't have to have tried it either.
Right. Now, and deep fried cheese curds aren't just the bane of the lactose intolerant. They're also, if you like your heart to continue pumping past age 47.
I'm big on that. I like
yeah,
that.
Yeah, so stay away from those. I guess in Wisconsin they would probably say something like, don't eat those cheese curds, okay? Leave them for us. You won't like them, okay? Just go ahead and move along. Another thing that you could do with the cheese curds is chase it with brandy. Wisconsin is the largest consumer of brandy by volume, I think, outside of France.
Oh my God,
and
I
it
didn't know
may
that.
even rival France, but I kind of doubt it. France.
Why brandy?
Your guess is as good as mine. There's French influence, the trappers and what have you in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Absolutely, like Flambeau and names all over the place that have a French flair. Eau Claire. But for whatever reason, brandy is huge. And so when you come from Wisconsin and go to a bar and ask for a brandy Manhattan, they look at you like you're nuts. Brandy, rye is the Manhattan, right? Brandy old fashions. And what would be another one? Anyway, brandy. So huge cheese consumer, huge brandy consumer. Maybe that balances it out. The cheese tightens you up and the brandy loosens you up.
No.
I don't know. Maybe it's just everybody's just trying to find equilibrium in Wisconsin.
And we were talking about the other popular pastime is not going outside and drinking, which your wife Bonnie has commented is why you're such a good bartender.
Yeah, it's a survival skill in Wisconsin. It is, absolutely. So we've kind of covered everything that I brought in with cheese in Wisconsin, and maybe someday we'll look at brandy again. But you have an interesting story or 10 about, what was it, moonshine?
Yeah, moonshine and rum running. And initially we were just so excited that there was sound. I was like, I'm just going to do a bonus episode and throw out one of my favorite stories that has like nothing to connect to whatsoever. And to give some connection, I mean, like most people know about prohibition, that period of time where we thought it was a good idea to outlaw alcohol. And I don't know how many people have experience with moonshine. And when I'm talking moonshine, I'm not talking the stuff that you go in and buy off the counter in the liquor store. That's not moonshine. I have people keep bringing it here going, look, I got moonshine. I'm like, that's not in a mason jar. You actually paid for that from a store. That's that's not what it's supposed to be. And I've had experience with proper moonshine, which was a friend down in Virginia on the Northern Neck. His neighbor Lyle had a beautiful still, and he would make fresh moonshine out of that, and he'd make the flavored ones and stuff. But I think one of my favorite experiences there was one night he was having a bachelor party for somebody he worked with, and so he invited my friend Bill and I over. So we walked down to the barn, and he's got a mason jar right under the still, and there's fresh moonshine coming out. There's like 4 or 5 young men there, and he passes them the mason jar, and one takes a sip and has this look of like he's been punched in the chest, and the next one takes a sip and has a similar look, and I think third person after that was I got handed it, and I take a sip, and I'm like, oh, this is nice. I hand it to Bill, and Bill takes a sip and makes a very happy face. We hand it to the next two guys who, I think they were all brought up on Bud Light or something like that, honestly, because this was beyond what they could handle. They hand it back to Bill, and Bill goes to hand it to another one of them. And they're like, no. So Bill and I are handing it back and forth. And finally, one of the young men just goes, how do you drink that? And I looked at them. I said, well, Bill Max, he's half Russian, half Polish. And I said, and I teach at a school that's a good portion Russian students, so you end up getting to know the families and drinking with the families. So I think that's why both of us were just like, oh, this is nice, this is normal. But it sort of leads into, so one of my favorite stories that I haven't found a place to fit, and so we're going to put it in here, is the story of King Ruby. And I love those. Like one of my favorite movies is, have you seen Road to Perdition? Tom Hanks,
Yeah, I
Paul
know,
Newman.
but I'm trying to remember if I've actually seen it.
Yeah, it's an amazingly done period piece where I think Paul Newman, he's sort of like a mob head, and his son sends somebody to kill Tom Hanks's character's son, and ends up killing the other boy and the wife. And so Tom Hanks goes through hitting every bank that Capone's mob has money hidden in the Midwest, to sort of hold it for ransom until he can get at the son. And it's an amazing period piece. It's beautifully done. And you see something like that, or any of the other, like, what are some other ones? There's Lawless. That's a really good one. There's Miller's Crossing, which is Coen Brothers. I just watched that one recently.
That's glorious.
Yeah, really, really good. So if you've seen any of those pieces, just sort of get yourself in the mindset. Because years ago, this is over 20 years ago, I was living in Hamden in Baltimore, and Hamden is the people who the people who have been there for generations are Appalachian families that were brought in to work in the mills around there. And I had my World War II Jeep out next to my row. I had a row house on a corner, and I had my World War II Jeep out next to the house and was working on it. And I always get somebody coming down telling me stories. Usually it'd be a World War II veteran. And this guy comes up and he says, oh, we had those with some sort of yard company he worked with in the 1950s. And I asked him about the war. He goes, "Oh no." He says, "I was he says I wasn't in the war, but he says we did have those after the war." And then we got talking vehicles, and we got into the fact that I worked at the fire museum, and he got talking about the big old Mack trucks they had in the 30s out in that they were still using out in Appalachia. And one thing led to another, and finally he looks at me and he says, "Have you ever heard of King Ruby?" And I said, no, and I've done a bunch of research and never found anything on this character. So he tells me the story of King Ruby, which should be a short film or could be expanded into something much larger. And this fellow was, when he was a kid, was present for part of this. Now, King Ruby ran a small town in Appalachia, I don't know exactly where, that was making their money during the prohibition off of moonshine and rum running. And they had a route where they would take I forget what the cars were called, but they would have the cars done up so that they could have a bunch of alcohol hidden in them. And this is like one of the origins of hot rodding, was to take these sort of hoopties and Model A's or whatever and soup them up so it didn't look like it was a hot rod, and then have hidden compartments in them so they could make the run to Chicago. And apparently he had a group of like kids that would head out from town and head up the back roads, and with moonshine loaded and hidden in the cars to deliver to Chicago. And one of these boys got pulled over, and a unwitting sheriff's deputy or something like that searched the car, found the moonshine, and arrested him for speeding, rum running, whatever he could drum up. and there was a court date. Well, this was such a big thing that it was announced to everybody in the town the day this boy was going to trial. So this guy was probably 9 years old or something when this happened, and the entire town packed up and went to this courthouse in whatever town north of them. And so he was describing to me from his 9 or 10-year-old perspective what he saw, which was they all filled the courtroom, and the judge came in. A very traditional courtroom. I mean, you've got the benches, you've got the sort of fence with the gate knit up at the front that I don't know what it's called. The two tables, the judge's bench. And he said everybody had settled in. They'd gone through a couple other quickies, and then the boy was brought in, and he was sat down at a table with his appointed lawyer, and the judge started to read through the charges, at which point the back doors to the courtroom opened. It was two doors, split in the middle, opened up, and 5 men walked in. And the 5 men walk in, and it's 4 men surrounding a much smaller, very dapper-looking fellow. And the 4 men are quite tall, all wearing trench coats, and all with something very long and noticeable on the right side of their trench coats. And 2 of them stand at the back. 2 of them had opened the door, held the door open for the little dapper fellow, who continued walking into the courtroom with 2 more men. The 2 had opened the doors, shut the door behind them, and then stood there in front of the doors. And the little dapper fellow keeps walking right up to that gate. And the next 2 men open up the gate for him, and then stand there on either side of the gate. Stand there, close it behind him, and he walks right up to the judge's bench. And the judge looks at him and says, just immediately, what is the meaning of this? And the little dapper fellow looks at him and he says, I'm King Ruby. And he looks at him and he says, and I run the town this boy is from. And you know full well that in this time, what we make our money off of is moonshine. He says, so I'm here to pay his speeding ticket. And the judge looks at him and then looks at the 4 men and looks back at him, and he starts to explain why this is not right, why you can't be doing this. And King Ruby looks at him again. He says, I'm going to explain something to you. He says, if anybody in my town does something not involving moonshine, there is a white horse tied up outside the general store. It is trained to go to my house. He says, you send a deputy to my town. He says, whether the man has hit a bank, he says, whether he has beaten his wife, he says, I don't care. If they have broken the law for anything other than moonshine, send them to the general store. Have them get on the horse. The horse will take them to my house, and I will have your man for you within the hour, as long as it's not moonshine. The judge looks at him, and King Ruby reiterates, I am here to pay his speeding ticket. And the judge looks at him and looks at the 4 men with the obvious something large and scary concealed in their trench coats, and tells King Ruby how much the bill is for the speeding ticket. And King Ruby pulls out his wallet, puts the cash on the bench, collects the boy, and then they reverse the process going out. The 2 men at the gate open up the gate. King Ruby walks past them. They fall in behind him. The 2 men at the door open up the doors. He walks past them. They fall behind the next 2 men. That's it. And the fellow who told me the story said the judge just sat there and stared. He said, and the town just waited a couple minutes, and then the town just filed out after.
To get a drink.
Probably.
Yeah. Follow that kid home.
And so that's the little story of King Ruby. That well, it's short. There's a huge amount of depth and a whole world there.
Prohibition was an amazing time, and it's one of the periods I think about now. Regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, blue or red, we have open corruption, and we're reveling in it. We, meaning whoever is reveling in it.
Oh my God, yeah.
Prohibition was worse. It was open. Just the woman who was appointed the federal prohibition czar. She was in charge of enforcing prohibition at the federal level. I'll paraphrase her quote: "If there's a police officer in this country who's not on the take with moonshiners, he's a fool." There was a lot of money to be made in that, and they finally gave up even trying to enforce it. In fact, some places never did enforce it. A lot of places never enforced it. Maryland didn't, I believe.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Maryland didn't ever actually enforce prohibition. There were other states as well. Your beloved Canada was a major supplier.
Oh my God, we were just making money.
The Prohibition saw a surge, an increase in the number of rabbis in the United States. The reason being, wine used for religious purposes, right, was not enforced. So if you were a rabbi...
I think I'll be a rabbi.
Exactly, that's what happened. And everybody knew. So King Ruby was one of how many countless kings in their community, in their town, their township, whatever. Capone was one example of it.
Yeah.
But there were also, and Prohibition gave rise to the gangster, there'd always been there.
It created a world for them.
It created an organization, a demi-monde that just has flourished ever since. Well, apparently the demi-monde, the mob, has been overheard complaining about the quality of outlaw they're getting. Their criminals aren't as criminal as they used to be, and they roll over really easily if they're caught.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. It's you just can't trust anybody anymore. So, yeah, Prohibition, King Ruby. There's a brilliant book about Prohibition called Last Call. And I'm kicking myself metaphorically right now because I cannot remember the name of the author. Anyway, I can't remember the name of the author. But if you get a chance, you want to read about a period of America that was somewhere between today and the Civil War, Last Call is the book to read.
Okay, I'll add that to the list.
More women began drinking. The blue laws about not drinking on Sunday were of course, completely ignored because you couldn't drink at all. So people would gather in speakeasies and drink on any day of the week they bloody pleased because they were already breaking the law.
Yeah, you're already outside the law.
Exactly. And police officers, being human and resourceful, were in on it. It was a great way to make a little extra money, and you busted up some barrels if you had to, if the right people were looking, but. Yeah, that Prohibition was an interesting time in this country.
That's actually the Capone reminds me briefly of a brief side detour. When I was in high school, there's a family called the Collings family. They used to have a group of World War II planes that flew around North America, and they have an amazing museum up in Stowe, Massachusetts. And I went to school with the son. And they had a open house at their collection. And the father, Collings Sr., saw that my dad and I were really into the antique cars. And he says, "Oh, let me give you a tour of the rest of the collection." And we go downstairs, and there's just these, outside of the museum space, there's these amazing cars, and they're covered in dust. And he's explaining, well, I collected cars for a while. And then I got interested in airplanes. And as he's talking, I see a limousine that says Capone on the front of it. And I looked at it, and I said to him, I said, is that really? And he says, oh yeah, that's the limousine that Capone bought for himself when he got out of Alcatraz. And I just remember staring at that car going, I would volunteer here just to polish the car and get the dust off of it. How do you have Al Capone's limousine sitting in your basement covered in dust? It was just absolutely killing me.
Al Capone, yeah, Al Capone's anything.
Yeah,
Even,
yeah,
you know.
that's
The baseball bat he used to beat people up.
Oh my God,
That would've
yeah.
been great. Louisville Slugger, yeah.
jokingly. There's a fellow here in town. There's things that we accept as normal here in this town, but you've been into the Busy Bee, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we've got this antiques, crafts, whatever it is, collection that's called the Busy Bee. That's run by a fellow who owns scrapyards throughout the area. One day he was proudly telling me, I was looking at some of the antique cars he had piled up behind it, and he goes, oh yeah, he says, I don't know if it's true, but he says, apparently, I forget what it was, a Hudson or something like that. He says, apparently that was Al Capone's dentist's.
Who knew he drove a Hudson?
Yeah, it's just, it's at the same time, it's just like Tom just finds everything. But I guess a winding up thought is, with the story of King Ruby, there has to be more stories like that out there. And we keep finishing every episode with saying, please tell us your stories and your detours, and send them in. If you've heard anything like King Ruby, any of those stories from the backwoods that have been possibly lost, but you might be the one person who heard it, because I can't find anything about King Ruby anywhere. I may be the last person who's like sharing this story at this point. If you have one of those stories, please send it. Take some time, type it up, and send it to Merlin's Barn, MERLINSBARN @gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram too. If you're bad at typing and you want to figure out some way to make a sound file and send it and email it to us too, do that, and I'll work on it. But I would absolutely kill to find more stories like this.
Who are you going to kill?
I don't know. There's a list. There were like 9 on it the last time.
I need to check and see if my name is on that
No,
list.
no, you're fine. You
okay.
make good drinks.
Oh, that's right. The saving grace. That's good.
And you keep putting up with our editing issues.
Yeah, the murder could go 2 ways. You know, it just depends. It depends one bad pause, and I lose my mind. And
John comes down, and you don't get Merlin's Barn anymore
No.
because we screwed up and we were playing with the misfortune cookies again.